We've seen the tragedy of the terrorist attack in Melbourne. We've seen a sequence of these attacks in the United Kingdom this year, Westminster Bridge, Manchester Arena, London Bridge, just recently. One of the most powerful voices pushing back against the threat of radical Islamic terrorism in the UK has been Tommy Robinson. And Tommy's been building a very strong support base in Australia. He's seen very much as a voice of common sense, a voice of realism in dealing with this problem. Tommy Robinson, welcome to Mark Latham's Outsiders, and congratulations on the work you've been doing.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
And can I just ask you right off the top, Tommy, what the hell has happened to your country?
What's happened is we've been betrayed. Sometimes I try and look at it like, can we blame Muslims for wanting to commit jihad? Can we blame Islam? Or do we blame the people who have allowed and facilitated it? Because Islam has done what it does. The true devout followers of Islam have done this for 1400 years. Anyone can pick up the history books. Anyone can do this and go through the history of Islam and realise exactly what the future holds when you bring large percentages into your country. Anyone can do that. So I blame, and how I feel betrayed is by our politicians and by our leaders. If you go back through the history of the UK and you go back through previous world leaders, whether it be Sir William Gladstone, he held the Quran above his head in Parliament and he said there will never be peace on this earth so long as we have this book. This book is a violent, cursed book. Okay? Sir Winston Churchill said, Islam has the power to bring Europe back to the Dark Ages. Individual Muslims will show great traits as individuals, but Islam will always bring them backwards. He used to call them Mohammedans. Mohammedans believe that women are their property. All of these previous world leaders spoke openly and honestly about Islam. Now, and that's throughout our history, whether it be army generals, people in charge of the military in Britain in the early 1900s, all of these people spoke very openly and honestly about what Islam is. Now, in our generation, in our era, we're being lied to. I call it the great lie that Islam is a religion of peace. It never has been. In fact, that term, Islam is a religion of peace, is in no history books until September 11th, when George Bush began the lie.
Well, Tommy, I can just give you my experience. I was travelling through London between Christmas and New Year just past, and with my travelling companions, we walked over Westminster Bridge, we walked over London Bridge, we walked through the Borough Market, and the person I was travelling with, sensing the edge on the streets, the obvious nature of the problem, as we left, she said, London will be the venue for the next terrorist attack. And tragically, that was true, and it's been doubled up. So these problems seem to have been obvious even to visitors just walking the streets. The edge, the nature of the community, the tension on the streets, if you like. Why has the political class, why has the political establishment in the UK been so neglectful, so ignorant of what appeared such an obvious problem?
Well, I'd say the Labour Party have purposely brought these people in. They've purposely imported this ideology and its followers to do so for loyal votes. So in many of our towns and cities, the Labour Party only have a future. Their only future is in the Islamic community because of the demographical change. Now, in Australia, it's what everyone needs to be looking at is the growing change in demographics of communities in our countries. For example, since 1960s and 70s, the Islamic community in the UK has doubled every 10 years. So whether it's gone from 300,000 to 600,000, 600,000 to 1.2 million, 1.2 million to 2.4 million, you can see where we're going. And that wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't be a problem if it was the Sikh community or the Hindu community. That demographical change wouldn't be that much of a problem. But with the Islamic community, when you see broad terms of, we had a man called Trevor Phillips who was head of the race cultural diversity in the UK. Now, he'd done a poll, and in that poll, he found that 66% of British Muslims would not report on another Muslim who was going to fight with ISIS. Now, that's not a small number. We also saw that over 200,000 British Muslims supported suicide bombing. We also saw that 25% of British Muslims wish to enforce Sharia law on everybody in the UK. These sort of numbers are only going to grow as the demographics change. Now, in the UK, 5.6 children is the average birth for Muslims. We have 1.3. This will be the same in Australia. This birth rate will be the same. It's the same across Europe. I believe in France, the average Muslim's having 7.1 children. Now, this is a huge, huge problem. And countries can do things to address this because it's quite simple. The most terrorist atrocities in Europe, which is 20 in the last 2 years, have been in France. That's because France has the most Muslims in Europe. That's the reality. And if countries wish to address this problem, they should be addressing it, which they can. You can limit the benefits for children. That would stop us paying, because we are paying. My local imam has 14 children from 3 wives. We are paying for all of that through our benefit system, through our open and over-generous benefit system. We are paying for multiple wives. All of these issues can be addressed, or not addressed, but try to limit the problem we're going to face in the future. And I'm afraid, which is a reality, is that what you've seen in the last 2 weeks or even the last 3 months, in the last 3 months, we've had 3 huge terror attacks in the UK, and we've had 5 stopped, and that's in 3 months. This is our future. The security, the stability that we enjoyed as a generation, our children will not enjoy that. They will not have the same security and stability that we've loved. And we have given that away, and we still continue to give it away. Our leaders are giving it away. And that's what really angers and frustrates me, is that as an Englishman and as a father, we have a duty. We have a duty to hand down a safer and prosperous country to the next generation. And that is a duty that we are failing at miserably.
So, Tommy, are you saying that there are Labor MPs there who'd be thinking they'd lose their seat, they'd lose their constituency if they stood up to radical Islam? So they pander to it instead. They don't say things like learn English, integrate into the community, for people to out the radicals and deal with this problem realistically.
Mark, they would lose their jobs. They would. They wouldn't be voted back in. You've seen in cities across the UK, even when we have this, I don't know how much you've looked into the rape epidemic that we have. They call it grooming, like it's some pretty sort of word like grooming. What it is where multiple Muslim men, who are usually brothers, cousins or work colleagues, they take young English girls as sexual slaves and they abuse them, they beat them, they rape them. Yeah. Now, this was going on in all Labour constituents. And the Labour councillors knew. In fact, some of the Labour councillors were acting as defendants for the people doing it. But the Labour councillors knew, and not one of them reported it or done anything because they didn't want to upset. And this has come out in a government report called the J Report in Rotherham. It came out that they didn't want to upset the multicultural love nest. That's basically what it was. They didn't want to upset their vote bank of politics. And Tommy, so they're sacrificing our women. Now they're sacrificing our children, and also in order to, and when I say the future, I'll bring you back to Luton again, which is my hometown. By 2030, which is now only 13 years, the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community of that town will increase by 70 to 77%. These are government statistics. The white and black community of that town will increase by 1 to 1.3%. So the Labour Party know full well where the future lies in those sort of areas. It lies with appeasing and cuddling up to Islam, unfortunately. Now that's something that we need to get, and really we need to address as a country, and not just our country, your country, Europe, the whole world needs to address this.
Tommy, after the recent attack, Prime Minister Theresa May said there'd been too much tolerance of extremism. You were saying that 10 years ago, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, and I was called an extremist and a bigot. Even, you know, Theresa May, so 4 years ago, no, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I set a meeting up with Theresa May was our Home Secretary, but she was an MP. So I got someone in her constituency to set a meeting up with her, and rather than them turn up, I turned up. And I sat her down, and I gave her a laptop, and I run through a radical mosque in my hometown of Luton. Now, Khalid Masood, what it turns out, and what she kept saying is, I can't comment on that, I can't comment on that. Now, what it turns out, Khalid Masood, the Westminster attacker who run over 40 people, guess where he worked, guess where he was radicalised, guess who paid his wages? That same mosque and that same imam, I sat down and tried to drill Theresa May and beg her, not drill her, I was begging her. Because this same mosque in my hometown, and the reason why I know about it is because I've been brought up there. I understand it. I know what's happening. I've had friends who have converted to that same mosque. I've had children in the year above me and the year below me at school who have gone and fought and died for ISIS in Syria. So this problem is not something that I would read about. It's an experience of life that I've lived. And I tried to warn her, and we continue trying to warn her. We've been screaming from the rooftops for nearly a decade. And we've been slandered, attacked, vilified. And only now, with what's happening, are people realising that the threats and the risk we said we were at was genuine and real. And we've been telling the truth for that long.
So you feel that the Tory party then and Theresa May, they're as useless as Labor in dealing with this. What is the solution politically?
I feel that they are. I don't see any other group that can. Labour are worse. Labour are far worse. Labour are traitors to our country for what's happening. I have as much anger with what they've done and what they've allowed to happen. I see that the opportunity is there for Theresa May to become an exceptionally strong leader of this country if she grips it. And everyone is screaming and begging for her to take it. And even in her most recent statement, we have been too tolerant of extremism. Now, you've been too tolerant of Islam. You've been too tolerant of Islam. Now, I can go through any mosque. I've just done this now. We're releasing a video later on Rebel for the Didsbury Mosque, which is where Salman Abedi, the Manchester suicide bomber, attended. And I've gone back through all the preachers that have spoke there and all the things they've said. And I mean, you'll be disgusted at the things you hear that are being promoted in this mosque. Now, and the thing is, that's not just this mosque. This is not an extremist mosque. It's just a mosque promoting Islam, where we say we should kill gays, where women who commit adultery should be stoned, where people who leave Islam should be murdered. These are the comments from their leaders, from their imams, from their sermons. And this is going on across our country. And still now, in light of what we've seen in the last 3 months, I've not watched the TV and I've not seen one politician or one media representative talk openly and honestly about Islam. Not one. We're still not mentioning the problem. Still now. Theresa May will come out and say, extremism. What do you mean by extremism? What are you talking about? The problem is Islam. And the problem is not all Muslims. We know that, yeah? But the core tenets and the scripture within Islam is what is giving this inspiration. It's what's driving it. It's what's pushing it. And until we have an open debate, and until we can identify where the problem's coming from, I don't see much hope other than a future of chaos and destruction.
Yeah, it seems to me the debate is broken into 2 groups. There's the Be Nice faction, the elites, the lefties, who basically say that we need to be nice to Islam. The terrorists are not real Muslims. We don't want to antagonise people. We don't want to lose informants in the community. But surely, do you detect that the Be Nice group have lost public opinion now? We're at a tipping point where the other faction needs to come into play, the more realistic approach, the Be Realistic approach about this problem. Do you sense a big change in public opinion, that the Be Nice mob have lost all credibility and the public are looking for a hard-headed, realistic approach to deal with this issue?
I sense we're at a huge turning point with the general public. Still, the leadership have their heads buried in sand, but the general public, you can see that, I see that by the reaction we get when we go places. I get heroes reaction from people. Yeah? I'm just a normal person telling the truth. That's all it is. I'm not doing anything extraordinary. I'm just speaking the truth. How has it become that speaking the truth can make someone a hero? Because all of our politicians, none of them will speak openly and honestly. That's all we're doing. We're just telling the truth. It's just, here's the facts, here's the reality, make your own mind up. And I sense that Britain is primed and ready. After this election, there is a huge void to be filled. And I want to fill that void. I want Rebel Media to fill that void. I want to fill it and direct people and start a national movement against this. And only when our politicians see the unity and the strength in numbers that we will generate, will they start adhering and adapting to the policies that we're demanding.
Well, you've got a lot of supporters in Australia. I'm sure also in the United States. I'm fascinated by the clash now between American President Donald Trump and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan's out there saying that Trump is not welcome in Britain. But earlier on in the program, I played the ridiculous comments of Sadiq Khan claiming that London is the safest city in the world. How can this man say this after a terrorist attack that's killed 7 and possibly more? How can he actually say it's the safest city in the world given these problems in recent times? Isn't this an act of delusion? And in fact, the United Kingdom needs the realism of someone like Trump rather than the delusionism of someone like Sadiq Khan.
Sadiq Khan, who does he work for first? Is he working for the interests of the Labour Party manifesto, or is he working for Islam? Is he benefit? This is the problem we have with each. When you go through Sadiq Khan's history, go back through his history, the groups and the people he's aligned himself with for 20 years, radical terrorists. One of the men from Manchester, who forgets my mind, from America, who he was trying to get into our country. He was trying to push so he could get some of the most extremists in the world into the UK. This was before he became mayor. And all people talk about, oh, isn't it great? Look how great it is that London's got a Muslim mayor. It shows all the tolerance. No, it doesn't. It shows the growing number of Muslims in our capital city. That's what it shows. And it shows the liberal elitists. Because it would be great if in a non-Muslim area, we can celebrate when in a complete Muslim area, when a non-Muslim is voted in. That will show some tolerance. But the reality is, I'll bring you back to Khalid Malik. Shalid Malik in 2007, 2006, he stood in front of and he was the first Muslim minister for the Labour Party. He stood in front of a hall full of thousands of Muslims. And he said in 2003, we had one Muslim MP. 2006, we'll have 2 Muslim MPs. In 2008, we'll have 8 Muslim MPs. In 2016, we'll have 16 Muslim MPs. And in between saying this, he was saying, Inshallah, 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 God willing, God willing, God willing. Then he said, within 30 years in this country, the Prime Minister will share our faith. And all of the Muslims are applauding and clapping. That is the problem. What has your religion got to do with politics? We have the separation of state and religion, but the only thing Muslims vote for is a fellow Muslim. That's it. Now, and as we see the demographical change in the UK and the huge numbers as we create Muslim ghettos, which is what we've created across this whole country, Muslim inward-looking and backward Muslim ghettos where the police don't even police the streets, they rather have Sharia-controlled zones. That is the reality, and our future is, I see nothing but chaos for our future. And as a father of 3, it's terrifying. And it's terrifying to see even now, at a moment when our politicians should be, and everyone should be awake to this threat. Our children have been blown to pieces 2 weeks ago. People enjoying a beer. Women, they went up to a girl and just started stabbing her in the throat as she's sitting enjoying a restaurant. Even now, we still don't hear leadership. We see no leadership, even now.
Tommy, what about the scale of the problem? In Australia, it said we've got over 400 would-be jihadists on watch lists by ASIO, our spy agency, and the Federal Police. In Britain, it's said to be over 3,000. How do you possibly deal with a problem on this scale?
Well, Mark, that's 3,000 that are on 24-hour a day, 7-day watch. There's actually 23,000 on the terror watch list radar. 23,000. 3,000 we're watching. We had 4 times as many British Muslims went to fight for ISIS than have ever joined the British military. That's our problem. If you want to look to Belgium, Belgium have 60,000 on their monitor list. So Europe is in big, big problems. Now, when we see, like example, one of the attackers on the London Bridge attack, he wasn't born in our country, okay? He's been allowed to come into our country. That's not their right. That's not a right. That's a gift been given to you. When you become on our terror watch list and you're standing on the streets, as he was, on national TV, demanding Sharia law, inciting hatred against non-Muslims, it's not actually that difficult. These men have to be booted out of our country. If you've got 400 Muslims in Australia on your watch list, however many of them were not born in Australia should be deported tomorrow. That's not difficult. The rest of them should be interned, because what we have is a war. We are at war with a worldwide war with a violent fascist ideology. Now, these men are foreign combatants fighting against us. How are we housing them, feeding them, and allowing them to keep walking our streets like ticking time bombs until they explode on our communities and kill? They need to be taken off our streets. I still can't believe we've had over 450 ISIS fighters who have been out there. Let's not kid ourselves. They've been out there raping, pillaging, murdering, and killing. And now they're walking around Tesco's or Sainsbury's with us. That is insane. And and since David Cameron, after Lee Rigby's death, David Cameron set up a 5-year, he should be called in for this. He set up a 5-year government task force to tackle this extremism. And I remember giving an interview at the time saying in 5 years' time, we will be in a much worse situation we are, because you haven't even identified where the extremism is coming from. Now, after he set that up, we've allowed trained ISIS fighters by their hundreds, if not nearly thousands, to come into our country.
And what would you do with immigration policy then to stop them coming into the future? Britain's left the European Union. What would you do in terms of border control?
In terms of border control, I'd put a temporary, not permanent, I'd put a temporary block on all Muslim immigration into our country. Until we at the minute, we don't know who's in our country. That's the reality. Another terrorist, in the Manchester area, which is where the suicide bombing was, there's a famous terrorist called Burgos, who he stabbed a police officer to death. He stabbed her to death in a counter-terror raid 3 months after coming into our country in the back of a lorry. Over 200 to 300 people are still coming into our country every week in the backs of lorries. That's that we know about. We need to fortify our borders. We need to protect our people. In the reality check is our security services don't actually know who's in our country. They haven't stopped these last 2 attacks. And this most recent one wasn't one man acting on his own. There was 3 of them, which must have took planning. And one of those men was on a documentary 12 months ago in England on Channel 4 TV called The Jihadi Next Door. We know who they are, and they still can't stop them. So I'd bring in policies that would prevent all Saudi Arabian money, all Qatari money, all Iranian money coming in and funding madrasas and schools in our countries. Any mosque showing signs of radicalisation or promoting Sharia should be closed down indefinitely. The Charity Commission need to really get to grips, because most of this is funded through charities, Islamic charities. The majority of this extremism is funded through them. They should be closed down. How they're not closed down? When I look as a simple person at all of these things, it's just common sense. It's not hard. Yeah. It's common sense. If you've got people who have been fighting for ISIS, you cannot let them back in our country. And then when you're letting them back in, or you're putting Muslims in jail for terrorism, you can't put people in jail for terrorism with car thieves. That does not make any sense. With these men are foreign combatants, they are soldiers against us. They should be in prisoner of war style prisons. They shouldn't be intermixing, because what we're seeing is, I think our MI5 said 800 prisoners are coming out of our prison system every year radicalised. That's 800 more that we need to keep monitoring. We've got our election at the minute, and we're talking about the lack of police on the street, and they're all arguing about how Theresa May cut the number of police. If we've got 3,000 Muslims on 24-hour-day watch with 27 police officers each day for one man, okay, then we can solve this problem straight away. We can solve our policing problem, our budget problem. That's £9 billion that costs us. We can solve all these issues if you just clamp down and get rid of these Islamic extremists. And at some point they're going to have to, because English people aren't going to sit by forever whilst their families and their loved ones are massacred and killed by men who we know who they are, we know what they want to do, and we're merely allowing them and monitoring them until they do it.
And Tommy, haven't we got also a big problem in our public culture? The Australian experience that I see is that in so many places you've got left-wing elites in the universities, the schools, the public broadcaster, our Human Rights Commission, who openly attack and disparage Western civilisation. They're saying that Australia's a nation of racists, bigots, white male privilege, wife bashers, so many things wrong with our culture. And I always think, well, if you're a young, disaffected Islamic lad in a Muslim type community and you're looking at this stuff, you'd think, well, these Westerners don't even defend the virtues of their own civilization. They don't defend the virtues of their own culture. Why would I want to be part of that? So these people making the attacks on our civilization are actually adding to the prospects of radicalisation. Do you have that problem in the United Kingdom? And don't we need to turn it around in our public institutions to require the people we're paying for as taxpayers to be more supportive of the wonderful things that Western civilization has achieved over centuries, be proud of who we are, stop apologising for who we are, and encourage Islamic communities to join with us in those Western values?
Well, we do have it completely, the school, the education system. And what it also does, what that does, is it creates a huge void that Islam is filling. Because, and I'll bring you back again to experiences. Growing up in Luton, white English people are a minority in my hometown. My hometown is 30 miles north of London, with a population of 200,000 people, 60 to 70,000 of which are Muslim. We have 30 mosques. Now, I've grown up in that town, and everyone pretty much are the sons of immigrants. My mum was an Irish immigrant. Now, when it comes to St. Lucian Day, there's a massive celebration. When it comes to St. Patrick's Day, there's a 3-day festival for the Irish. When it comes to Eid, there's fairground, there's parks, there's bouncy castles, there's everything. When it comes to our day as English men, for St. George's Day, it's banned. Every year, banned. One year, they sent out letters to all the schools telling the children that if they bring in the emblem of St. George, our flag, then they will be sent home from school. Now what this does, and the education system that's telling them that our history is bad, what this does, every English young man who say they're 15, 16, they're walking with their heads down. They don't know who they are proud. Or where they've come from. They have no idea of their identity. They have no pride in themselves. They have no pride in their culture, in their history, nothing. What Islam then does, when you convert to Islam, because it's a very powerful ideology, and I say this because 2 of my best friends have converted to Islam. And they've gone on to be radicals. They've converted because we've lost our sense of identity. We've lost it, and it isn't like we've lost it. It's been purposely inbred out of us. It's been inbred out of us, and it's been seen as something dirty to be English, something dirty to have your English flag. So until we encourage, and we should be encouraging every immigrant who's in this country, if we don't encourage them all to love this, to love the Union Jack, if we don't encourage all of them to feel British, to feel English, then we are going to live in one of the most polarised and divided countries as our history goes on. I believe America addresses this a bit better than we do. Because of their swearing allegiance to the Stars and Stripes, I believe even if they have Muslims or they have black people in America, they are American. They feel American. We've done nothing to address that. We've brought these people in from faraway lands, whether it be Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq or Pakistan, and we've told them it's okay, all cultures are equal. And they're not equal. Our culture, our Western culture, is far superior, far better. That's why the work. So, yeah, we have huge problems, and the education system, every single institution in our country, schools, colleges, universities, prisons, everything is being used to radicalise and enforce Islamic extremism. Everything. They've infiltrated everything.
Well, it's funny you say that about St George's Day. We have the same problem in Australia, where Australia Day, the 26th of January, celebrating the anniversary of British settlement, Western civilisation in 1788. There's a big push from all parts of politics to get rid of Australia Day, which, as you point out, is a day when people who believe in Western civilisation can celebrate our virtues, our day, our way of doing things, not disparaging anyone else, not reflecting negatively on Indigenous culture or any other group in Australia. So we feel like we're under siege, that Australia Day is under siege, just as you say about St George's Day. So, Tommy, I want to thank you for your time this evening. You're an inspiration to many, many people in Australia who are very, very worried about the future, not only of this question of terrorism, but our civilisation, our culture itself. So continue the great work. So if you like that video, please sign up to Rebel Australia to make sure you don't miss any of our work, you don't miss any of our videos.